JT Crowley is Talking Books. On this show, you'll hear from emerging talent and seasoned veterans from around the world. They'll give you their take on the writing process and how to create the secret sauce of page-turning deliciousness. Let's get into that magical mixture of the art and science of creativity. Here's JT Crowley, author of The Smart Kids, and your podcast host.
Good morning. I'm JT Crowley, and joining me this morning to talk about her debut novel, Katie, A New Chapter, is Lisa Billingham from the West Midlands in the United Kingdom. The book and the main character, Katie, broadly speaking, partially reflects on her professional life and loosely touches on issues that have dominated her personal life. So let's welcome Lisa to the show. Lisa, welcome to Talking Books.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be here.
You're welcome. Lisa, when I started to read your book and to research not only your book, but a bit about yourself as well, along with the several chats that we've had over the past few weeks, I kind of get the view or the feeling, the sense that there's a touch of you in the main character, Katie. And and that there's the odd nod, the touch to what you've done in the past and what you do now. Because when I look at your profile, you're not only just an author, but you're a psychic medium, you're a spiritualist, you're a coach, and dare I say, a naturist.
Yeah.
That always gets a laugh, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And why not? And why not? We'll move on. So you've done many different things in your life, and what you're doing now is totally different to what you've done in the past. Do you want to talk about what you've done and why you're doing this at the moment?
Yes. Well, why I was doing this, or why I'm doing this at the moment, is because of COVID, really. It kind of threw a spanner in the works for everybody. But I feel it put me on the right path, because I was working in Fuerteventura as a holiday rep, and then we had to fly home. We got no choice. And I sat there and went, well, what shall I do now?
Yeah.
So I decided to write my book. And I'd been planning it in my head for about 12 months. I'd been on a course to see how to do it. And I'd already decided to write it as a novel, because I didn't want the he said, she said rubbish that comes with an autobiography or anything self-help book. So it's kind of all three, really. But it draws a lot on my experiences and my battles with mental health, hysterectomy. So quite a lot that I've been through is actually in the book and will be in subsequent books as well. But I came from the corporate world. I've worked in bars, restaurants, retail, you name it. And corporate world for 16 and a half years, and I enjoyed very, very little of it. And then when I hit the brick wall, I thought, right, the only way now is up. And a decade's worth of self-help and realisation, I suppose, has got me to where I am now, and with a published book. So,
wow, are you proud of that?
I am. It's strange because it was written in 2020 and published in 2020. Because we couldn't go out, it was never really celebrated properly. I went out for coffee and cake with a friend a few months ago, and it was like, do you know what? I haven't celebrated that. And she's like, right, let's celebrate now. We'll have another piece of cake and another coffee. I was like, okay, let's do it.
Sounds like a bit like beer in the coffee shop. You've got.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, a Victoria sponge cake.
So, Lisa, let's have a look at your book, and I want to start with your main character, Katie. Now, she's a complex character, isn't she?
Very.
She comes with quite a lot of, how shall I say, psychological baggage, which has been rooted in her past. Hence the need for her counselling and her low esteem. In the story, she faces abuse, physical and mental, and of course talks about her hysterectomy and all the complexities and the add-ons that go with that, with the early onset of the menopause. Would you like to explain to the viewers, to the listeners, why you gave Katie these characteristics?
I was trying to cram everything into the book, I think, when I first sat down and planned it and thought, what should I put into it? And it was a cathartic experience in writing it, and I was just writing everything, and I thought, I can't put all of this in, there's too much. But the biggest things in my life at that point are in the book, and was the hysterectomy and the battles with mental health, because had I not recovered to a certain point from my mental health issues, I wouldn't have been able to cope with the hysterectomy. So it's all like the knock-on effect. And I got halfway through writing the book, and she's got so much going on, and I could have gone on even more. And I thought, no, I've got to try and turn her life around in some way so that she starts to feel better. She starts to find herself. She starts to live a better life. Because I wanted the book to be inspirational. And once I'd got to a certain point, I was like, oh, no, this isn't the way, you know, give me something positive to throw in here. So, but her characteristics are, in a way, very much me. Although they're part me, part, you know, people I've seen on the street. It might be their hair colour, or it might be a characteristic of a friend or family member that's just thrown into the mix. And she's a fictional character, but she carries a lot of me with her.
And of course a lot of writers do that, don't they?
Yeah.
You know, to be an author, to be a writer, you've got to be, I think you've got to be a great observationist in life, and, you know, people watch. That's what I do.
Yeah, and me. Yeah, very much.
Like people watching, is there?
No, nothing, no. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, did they do that? Did they just do that? Oh,
yeah, absolutely, yeah. They're not talking to each other. They're not married. They're talking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The coffee shop. They're out for the day with, and they're both on their phones. Oh, that's about.
Absolutely, yeah. And you know, when I look at the book, you know, Katie, a new chapter, you know, I see that the you know, the story is set over, if my maths is right, over a 21-month period. And it's set in the early 1990s, you know, from 91 to 92.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm looking at the plot. Is it intentional that you set it then, and the way that you've set it up?
It was kind of accidental in a lot of ways. I didn't want to set it in 2020 or in, you know, the few years previous to that. And as I was thinking about the songs and the books, as the story took a hold of me, I suppose, and the characters started to do what they wanted to do. And I'm like, oh, that doesn't work then. And oh, that didn't happen then. And not mobile phones. I didn't want her to have a mobile phone or a computer, or she hasn't even got a television, because I wanted it to be how people interact with other people and what their thoughts and feelings were. And I thought, if you throw, dare I say, social media and computers and phones in the mix, then it's a whole different story. So once I'd started to research the era and the background almost of the other characters and what happens to them in this book, it made sense to do it at that time. It did change a while, because it started first of all in 1990, and then different things didn't fit, so I thought, right, 91, and then obviously it settled to start in March 1991. And then go through to December 92. When I first started it, I thought, oh no, it'll be like March to December. And then with different things that happened, I thought, this has got to go over a longer time frame. So it ended up being, like you say, March 91 to December 92.
Yeah, because it's important, isn't it? When you're writing in a certain period, you've got to get that period right. No point in writing something and then said, oh, her mobile phone rang. well, hang on, it's the 1970s. They didn't have them, and you're going to get caught out there. So yeah, you're absolutely right there.
Okay.
You know, as writers, we have to be careful about that. You know, when the story has been set in a certain period of time, we've got to reflect that period of time. You know, the dress style and things like that. But there you go.
That was interesting, looking at the dress sense as well.
Absolutely.
Like, what can I dress her in? Jeans and a t-shirt. It's a bit pants, isn't it? So I thought, So that was quite interesting. What did we wear in the 90s? And I think I must have like lost a great deal of the 90s. So no, I don't remember them.
You've put together, Lisa, an interesting web of characters to tell this interesting and intriguing story. So you've got Jack, for example, the pub landlord, Sylvie, the bookstore owner, Vera, the cafe shop owner, even. And of course, you've got John, Tom, and Michael. Now, John's an interesting character. He's a teacher with an alcoholic and a violent past, which resurfaces in the book.
Yeah.
Because I think he's a guy that's struggling with his sexuality. Now, Tom is also an interesting character. And I think that all this womanizing he's doing is just to hide a hurtful relationship in the past.
Yes.
But spiteful Michael is, well, here's another character, another side to the book. So would you like to tell the listeners, the viewers, how you interwove all these characters into this fabulous book of yours?
Oh, thank you. It was partly what you said about observation. When I started writing it, I started to observe things that were around me, and because of the time it was written, and we were very limited to what we could do and where we could go, I went for lots and lots of walks, different places just around me, and I found some very weird things. So, like, you know, the weather and all sorts of things. And then I came across a car, burnt out car, and I thought, and I just made notes of everything that I saw, and I probably got about 20 pages of A4 with just notes on squirrels and bird, anything and everything that I actually saw and observed. And then as I'm writing it, I thought, I've got to make this a bit more exciting for the other characters as well. So it's not just that they're listening to her or they're helping her or they're observing what she's doing. They've got things going on as well. So that when I finished it, if people were interested in it and they bought into the characters, they'd want the next book. If they didn't, it'd be like, well, I don't care, so forget it. And I won't do book 2 then. And it was just from observations of things and people, and I'm like, oh, what can I put in there? And then all of a sudden you've got a completely different angle when you just throw that one thing in there and think, okay, so what happens to him and why does he end up there? And I'd actually started writing all this into the first book, and I thought, no, I need to tell their stories separately and combine them all together, you know, so when they meet her, why they're feeling and thinking the way they do. So it was just mainly observations of things and people and characters and personalities of people from the past and things like that, and just trying to sort of almost throw that up in the air and see what comes out. Go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's good. And then as time went on, it was just they were writing themselves, really. I'm like, I don't want you to do that. Well, I'm doing it.
I think that's what most authors do.
Yeah.
Your book, there's many layers to this story, apart from Katie and all her issues. You've got John dealing with his demons from the past and to possibly, you know, hiding again about his true sexuality from people. Then you've got, as I says, you've got Tom and the hurtful relationship and all the womanizing to hide that, and spiteful Michael, a grudge. You know, that a grudge is interesting. I was thinking, oh, what's he got a grudge about? And, you know, and then you've got the attack on Jack. Now, I have to say, I was a little bit disappointed here because I'm a great crime reader. I love crime novels. And I'm thinking, when I looked at the story here about Jack and the burnt out car you've just said, I wanted to know more. Who did it? You know, why did it happen? What's happened in the past to create this scene? and what's going to happen here?
Yeah.
And I just thought, I'm going to ask her about this and say, so why, could you expand to the listeners and viewers and say, what's happening here? What's happening in all these layers of stories that you're writing here in this great book?
Well, I could, but that would kind of spoil book 2 and 3, really.
Oh, go on, let us.
I actually didn't think about it when I was writing it. I did, when I was writing that, I did sort of almost write the end of Jack. I actually killed him off in one of the chapters. I know I was a bit naughty. I'd got Sylvie coming to the hospital and Tom, because they were estranged, and Tom was like, I'm not talking to you, and well, your dad's dead, and coming out like this, and I'm like, no, I'm going to keep you alive and make you suffer a little bit more. So just because I did want to carry it on, and I thought, no, this book is about her. He will have his chance later on. So he is a bit of a naughty boy, shall we say. His background is not good, from where he comes from based in London. Obviously, most of the places in the book are made up, but a kind of London type gang area is where he comes from. And they escaped up there because of his past, and partly hers as well, because she's got a colourful past as well. So Sylvie's got a colourful past as well. So it's all yeah. Yeah.
So the book's got great layers, people, listeners, viewers, very intriguing, multi-layered is how I describe it. So it's not just about Katie. There's a lot more going on in this book. Once you've read it, you start to understand there's a lot going on. Yeah. So read the book. For me, Lisa, when your characters, there's one character we've not talking about, and for me, this is a hidden character. And this, in your novel, and that's the voice in Katie's head, who you reference to as bitch. The voice that challenges Katie's confidence, her actions. So why this silent, hidden voice character? Does this relate to what went on in your own life? As the character went on in your own head? Because we all know that Katie is, loosely based on you.
Yeah. Yes, very much so. That's very much the thoughts and emotions in the book are very much me. In most part, most of it. Some of it isn't. Some of it's other people or other people's experiences that I've touched on slightly. But most of it is me. And the bitch in her head, I suppose it's almost, it's an ego thing, isn't it? It's you're not good enough and you'll never do that. And you, the more you listen to it, the more you believe it. And I'd never thought about it until you said, actually, that is another character almost. That, the bitch could almost have a book of her own.
Oh, I think she could.
Yeah, just that, it had never occurred to me until you said it, to be honest. So you've got me like sort of thinking, how can I do that, Ben?
It's interesting because different people view the same book in different ways, and they come from different angles. So that's why I asked the question about this hidden character.
Yeah.
And as you said, you perhaps didn't realise that. So you never know. We might be having a book about the hidden character.
Yeah.
The title would be interesting. What would you call it? What would we call it?
Yeah, I know. The bitch.
The bitch. A new chapter. Yeah.
The bitch reformed. The bitch reformed.
Yeah.
Or the bitch reforms. Yeah. The bitch reforms. Yeah. Love it.
Oh, absolutely. Do you know what? And not just the book itself, because one of the most important things about a book is sometimes it's the cover itself, because that's the eye-catching thing that some readers like to look at. Oh, that's an eye-catching cover. So when you look at your cover of the book, Katie in a new chapter, it's got the birds and it's got the butterflies. Now, the woods obviously relate to the woods in the story. And I think that the butterflies, which there is a section on the butterflies, it's not butterflies themselves, it's referring to the butterflies in Katie's stomach, isn't it? The nerves. So you have lots of butterflies when you were dealing with all your issues.
Oh, yes. It's kind of multifaceted in some ways, because it's the butterflies in the stomach. It's the transformation as well, you know, with the from the caterpillar to the butterfly. But it's also, it did happen to me, because the butterflies when I was working in Menorca, I worked at a hotel, and there was plant pots all down the side by the pool. And bear in mind, this was high season, 2019, nobody by the pool, nobody about, which is just unbelievable. And all of a sudden, I'm walking past, and I'm looking for somebody. I'm already late for my next hotel, so I'm looking for a guest. And these butterflies, and there must have been about 100, just flew out and just surrounded me. And I'm like, okay, so what are you trying to tell me here? It was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. No photographic evidence, no proof, no nothing. And it was just that moment in time, and it was absolutely amazing. I'll never ever forget it. And I thought, that's got to go in the book, because that's several different things. That's, yeah, at the time I was still stressed. Butterflies in your stomach, because you know you're late for your next hotel, and you're all panicky because you know people are waiting for you, and you booked an appointment. And then the transformation, that I'm totally different to how I was before. Even though I'm still stressed, I'm a different person. And just the experience. So it's all kind of very different experiences all rolled into one, really.
Now, you give the character, Katie, she's aged about 23 in the book, isn't she?
Yeah.
And all the characters are quite young, all bar from Jack and Sylvie and probably Vera.
Yeah.
But the other ones, they're all young characters. And you give, you're talking here with Katie, going through the process of a hysterectomy, which, you know, you unfortunately at a tender age went through yourself. Do you think that blokes should be more aware of the issues around hysterectomy, which affect women? And, you know, and so do you think this could be a book for blokes to read as well, to broaden their minds?
Yes, very much so. I have had several male readers and several reviews from men and messages from men. Different parts of the book have stood out, like the abuse bit or hysterectomy. I never realised that. And of course, on top of the hysterectomy, you've got menopause, and you know it's a major operation. No matter how much of the organs are taken away, it's still a major operation, and it does change you. It's, you know, it's bound to that. I can't have children, and I haven't got children, so that's something else I've got to look at. Do I want to suffer the pain? Do I want children? There's so much to take into account, and I do think men need to understand it more. It's hard. They're never ever going to experience those feelings and those emotions and that actual physical surgery. And when I had my surgery, I actually chose a male consultant, because I'm like, well, I don't want to, he can only tell me the facts. He's not experienced it, so he was dealing in facts. And I'm thinking, if I pick a woman, is she going to say, well, I've been through this, and I'm like, no, just dealing facts. But when you're in that environment and you're in that relationship with somebody who's going through it, it's very hard to understand it from the woman's point of view. And the thoughts and emotions and feelings were exactly what I was going through when I wrote that chapter.
So that's why, that's a strong character in the book when she's talking about that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The book ends, it's set up in a chronological order. When you look at the book, everybody, the chapters are really dates, of events. That's how Lisa's put the book together, which is interesting. Was that purposeful?
It was accidental. It it was given right as a bad name because it was, yeah, it was like, as I read through my notes, which is all that they were when I started it, and I went to a developmental editor, she said, I love your notes. I'm like, God, that was my book. So I'm like, okay, start again. So as I'm going through it, because I've got so much information, I had to kind of section it off and go, right, when did that happen? Because as I'd worked through it and went back to edit it, I'd said something happened on a Wednesday, but when I actually researched it, that particular date was a Tuesday. So for me to remember and to make sure I'd got the order correct, I just titled it with a date. And then as I went back through, I'm like, well, what happens on that day? And I'm like, oh, I can't remember. So I had to read it through again and again and again. So I just put headings in of what happens in that chapter. And then when I came to print it and publish it, I just thought, you get advice from different people and like, no, you've got too many chapters, you don't want headings, you don't want chapter numbers. And I'm like, do you know what? I'm going to leave it in. I'm going to leave it in because it sets the scene of the time frame, people that were of the age that were alive in the 90s. It'll give people who weren't an idea of, the younger generation idea of what it was like. And for me to remember that what was happening in that chapter, and I thought, well, that's a good start, so that you can almost sort of entice the reader with the next chapter, like the hysterectomy, so they know what's coming, and then your knight in shining armour. Oh, he's going to save her. They're going to run off into the sunset. No, but that's the sort of idea of leaving them in, I suppose.
Yeah, and when when you look at the book. Towards the end, there's some authors said you need to put a happy end it so the the reader feels comfortable at the end of the book, and some people leave a bit like me, leave people in suspense and thinking, a bit like the TV companies, when the soaps come on, and the cliffhanger's always at the end, isn't it?
Yes.
Because they want you to either read the next book or to watch the next TV series or the next TV program. But in your book, you've opted to do a reasonable happy ending.
Yeah.
And this is the interesting bit, everybody. This is where the naturist bit comes in here. And I am going to talk about it.
Go for it.
Go for it, yeah. So the book ends like most novels on a happy note with the pub. So she begins, she now owns the pub and she's got her own house, but she's plucked up the courage before that to go on holiday, and for her that's a huge challenge for her confidence and things like that. So you take her to a little island abroad, and that's where she does some skinny dipping.
Yes.
Talk about that.
She does, yes. That was another quite pivotal time in my life. I wrote it in because, and I have had some comments about this, I want to go on holiday on my own, I've never had the confidence, I've not had the courage, how did you do it? And people that are saying this, some knew me when I was ill and some didn't. And I'm like, well, if you'd have said that to me 10 years ago, I would have laughed in your face. But it was very liberating for me. The first time was on a nudist beach. I didn't go in the sea. And I worked abroad. When I worked abroad, I was getting like, I'm going home because I've had enough. I didn't sign up for all this rubbish. I am going home. And my boss, the gentleman at the time, he's just like, Lise, go home. Don't go back to work today. I'll cover your hotel. Go home. Go jump in the sea. I'm like, okay, thanks, Dan. Go jump in the sea. He said, while you're at it, go jump in the sea with no clothes on. And I'm like, did we just have this conversation? And he's like, seriously? He says, you will, honestly, he says, you'll just love it. You'll just absolutely love it. And he told me, because he knew the area very well, he lives over there, and he told me where to go. So I got home, jumped all my stuff, got changed, walked down, and my flatmate came with me as well. And that was the start of it. We went in that night, we were in there for about 10 minutes, came out and we were like, wow. And then we had to do it again.
There you go, everybody. There's the naturist bit.
Yeah, we had to do it again. We did it regularly then. We did it 2 or 3 times a week, really. And then, when it got colder, we did it maybe once a week.
No, it doesn't work when it's cold.
Brilliant. Cold.
And it's so this is the new part of her chapter, isn't it? She's owning the pub, she's got a house, so this is the new life for her, and that's why it's called Katie, a new chapter. That's all about the book.
Yeah.
Well, Lisa, thank you for coming on the show. Lisa M. Billingham, everybody.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So, listeners, viewers, for me, this book has been delicately written. It's touching on many issues that are faced women and men alike, wrapped up in wonderful stories. So it's a book for women and men. So all it leaves me is to say is, I'm JT Crowley. Thank you for listening, watching, wherever you are in the world. So until next time, stay safe.